above 22%, which increased, interestingly, to 25% after passage of Obamacare. The study concluded that Americans desire smaller government. How do you propose to balance a smaller federal budget with the reality of needing to support diverse government functions and services?
I don't know who the 25% are that trust the government. What's wrong with these guys? They gotta wake up. I mean, this country was founded by people who didn't trust government. That's why we wrote a constitution, to keep these guys in line. Unfortunately, the judges no longer enforce it. But, what was your question?
My question was,
how are we going to balance it?
how would you propose to balance a smaller federal budget with the reality of supporting government functioning and services?
Well, we have to understand that most of the government...
What would you cut?
Yeah, well, I want to cut a lot of stuff, but what we have to understand is most of the services we get from government, we shouldn't get from the federal government. We should get them from the state government, if we get them at all. So I want to abolish all the functions that are not authorized by the Constitution. I don't want the federal government getting involved in things that it has no business being involved in. And there are most of what the government does. So I want to go and slash government spending across the board. I mean, the most important thing for the federal government is national defense. That's why it's there. That's why it has the power to tax. Each state doesn't have an army and a navy, so that's what the federal government has to do, and most of the federal government should be national defense. The rest of it should be done at a state and a local level. There are other things that the federal government can do, but the federal government's powers are supposed to be few and defined. That if that wasn't the case, the founding fathers never would have ratified the Constitution. They were initially nervous that the federal government would have too much power, and our founding fathers assured the colonists that was not the case. The federal government would be very limited, that you would barely know they were there. They would hardly tax you. They would be involved in diplomacy and matters of foreign affairs or war. And so we need to get the government out of these unconstitutional functions, and we're just cutting across the board. I mean, there are a lot of agencies that we can abolish completely. There are some other agencies that we can consolidate their functions. And of course, we have to go after the entitlements. I mean, the government is spending much too money on entitlements, and I don't think anybody is entitled to somebody else's money. We have to make that clear. We've got to make the cuts.
Rogue nations such as North Korea and Iran are intent on proliferating nuclear armament, thus increasing their global presence. Yet President Obama recently signed an arms reduction treaty. How do you anticipate this to resonate on global balance of power, and what diplomatic policies could make a positive impact on this?
I don't have a problem with a reduction in nuclear arms. We probably have more nuclear arms than we need, and other nations probably do as well. But the key is not to undermine the deterrent effect of the nuclear arms that we do have. I mean, that is the problem, to try to make some kind of categorical statements to the effect that the nuclear weapons will not be used. I mean, of course, you hope you don't use them, but you don't tell people that you're not going to use them. And what's the point of having them? The point of having them is that people know that they're there and they're afraid of doing something because you might use them. So you don't want to take that option off the table. As horrific as it might sound, it has to be on the table, and that's why the deterrent works. But I also think we do have to try to make sure that the nations, certainly Iran, are nations that that don't have a nuclear weapon now, but who might develop one, and it might fall into the hands of terrorists, which is pretty obvious, that there are certain times when we can take action and use the technology that we have, and the sophisticated weaponry and the satellites that we have, to make sure that that does not happen. But that can be done in a very strategic and a very low-cost way. It does not involve the mistakes that we made in Iraq. We don't have to invade a nation and occupy a nation, try to establish a government there to make sure that they don't develop nuclear weapons. We can do that very simply and very cost-effectively, and that's the type of defense I would favor.
Last question, and then we'll proceed to the audience questions. What does your senatorial win mean for Connecticut? What priority issues will you seek to address?
Well, Connecticut has a lot of problems, many of which are coming from Hartford, and hopefully as a senator from the state, people will pay attention to what I have to say, and maybe I can be an effective voice to help the senator, whoever becomes governor of Connecticut or the state legislature, to do what needs to be done on the local level, to have somebody with a bully pulpit who people listen to, talking about what really needs to be done to slash our state workforce, to get rid of a lot of these unfunded or make cuts to the unfunded pensions and to reduce taxes in the state. So instead of repelling businesses, we can attract businesses and create jobs for all of the government jobs that we eliminate, real jobs, productive jobs, and bring more businesses into the state. On a national level, though, what I want to do to benefit Connecticut, and Connecticut is one of the states in the country, it's certainly in the top 2 or 3, where we get back a smaller percentage of money from the federal government relative to what the federal government takes. So all the people in Connecticut, we pay Social Security taxes, we pay income taxes, and then we get money back. Some of our citizens get Social Security checks, or they get wealth, whatever they're getting from the government. But net, for every dollar we send to Washington, 60 cents trickles back. That's a lousy deal for the state of Connecticut. There are actually some states that actually get back more than they send to Washington. They benefit from this transfer of wealth. So what I want to do is reduce government spending so that I can reduce taxes, and I want to return a lot of the federal functions back to the states. And every time I do that, Connecticut has a huge windfall, because if I can cut the dollar in taxes, then Connecticut gets that 40 cents, and either the state government can spend it here in Connecticut, or it doesn't have to spend it at all, and the citizens can have a pay raise.